And so, Alan, I also muted you, but if you want to, if you have something that you think it's important to say that I miss, which I'm sure I will, then feel free to unmute yourself and chime in as you see fit. I would encourage everyone as we get started to pour themselves a glass of the Chardonnay, the Korea Chardonnay, as we get started. Thank you so much, Luis Contreras, for joining us today. As I said a few minutes ago, I am a enormous and long time fan of your wines. And so I am really excited to meet you today and have this conversation.
Likewise, likewise.
I have a question, which if you don't feel comfortable answering this question, feel free to just tell me. But on your website, it says that the winery was started in 1970 by the founder, and it never identifies who that is by name. Is there a reason for that?
I feel uncomfortable answering that question. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, no, I don't know the legalities about it, but I mean, the founder was Warren Wernatsky.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Warren Wernatsky was the founder, and he owns a vineyard now.
Right.
So, but to be honest, Hoyt, I do not know the legality part of that using his name.
I mean, Stagsley Wine Cellars has not changed ownership, has it?
So in 2007, it was purchased by Saint Michel Wine Estates.
Oh, that's right, of course.
And Piero Antinori from Italy.
That's right. I forgot that, and that perhaps is part of the reason that Mr. Winiarski's not mentioned on the website.
Exactly.
Is he still alive?
Oh, Hoyt, he is. And you know what? I would just picture him right now as we were talking about him. So he owns a vineyard in the south part of Napa Valley. And the vineyard is Arcadia. It's called Arcadia. And we purchased fruit, all the fruit from his vineyards. And he's a great grower now. And it's fun to see him. It's fun to see him in the vineyards when he's picking or it's time for harvest. He'll be there in 1, 2 in the morning, seeing the fruit and just enjoying the moment. So he's still very active in winemaking and vineyards. And
how old is he? He must be close to 90.
I don't want to mislead you, but I think he's around 84, 85.
84, 85. Well, yeah. The reason that I care so much about that is that in about, I think 46 years ago, 2 friends and I founded a charity wine auction in Nashville, Tennessee, that at one time was the largest charity wine auction in the country. It's not anymore because of Napa and Naples, and I think it is the longest continuously running charity wine auction in the country. Raised over $50 million at this point, donated over $50 million, not raised, to various cancer-related causes. But one year, I don't remember what year, but one year, Mr. Winiarski was the guest of honor. And one of the events was a major tasting of his wines for about 1,000 people, of your wines, for about 1,000 people. And at the end of the tasting, he told 1,000 people in this ballroom in Nashville that he thought I was the best sommelier in the world. So that's part of the reason I love your wines so much. And then about 3 years later, I was in Napa with 2 friends, and he personally conducted a private wine tasting of Cask 20. They're like 6 vintages of Cask 23 for 3 people, for the 3 of us. Wow. So it was 2 of the greatest moments in my life, and my 40-year life in wine were involved one, because it made, but partly because it made me feel really, really important. But to have, you know, for three of us to have that much of his time privately for a tasting of the Cask 23 was an extraordinary experience.
Yeah. So no, I agree with you. He's he's a celebrity, right? Let's say that, but in a different way. Just spending time, a few minutes with him in the vineyards, or just tasting wine. We had the opportunity to taste wine probably about a month ago, and he just brings another perspective to the meaning of tasting wine. Or when you're out there in the vineyards, he sees different things that at the moment you don't pay attention to it. So it's a walking encyclopedia for winemaking, and it's just a great joy and an experience to spend some time around him. I agree with you.
Well, he's of a generation in the Napa Valley of winemakers, which is, you know, they're disappearing. Robert Mondavi and Don Chapelet and you know, these great people who created what's going on now, who start, you know, he's one of the last of that generation of people who really put Napa Valley on the map.
Yeah. So Hoyt, it's very funny that you're mentioning those names. Right now, I'm conducting this tasting from a building, and within a building there is a room that is called the Golden Rectangle. Actually, he called it a Golden Rectangle. And behind me, there is a painting that was done in 1983, I believe, and it's called the Vintners. And you have there the vineyards from that time. So you have Andre Talashev, you have Dick Stelzner, Warren right there. So all Mondavi, Margaret Mondavi. So they're all right there in that big painting. So now that you're mentioning all that great vintners timing, I just wanted to share that.
As part of that charity wine auction, I had a series of events at my restaurant in Nashville. Unfortunately, Mr. Winiarski wasn't one of those. He was the guest of honor at the big event, but I did have at my restaurant a morning tasting and evening dinner with Robert Mondavi and Paul Draper from Ridge and Joe Heights. Did you ever meet Joe Heights?
No, I didn't have the pleasure to meet Joe Heights.
It was not really a pleasure. He's the most difficult person I've ever known.
Now that you mentioned that, it was George Tabor. I'm sorry, Steven Spurrier on his book. He did mention that when he was looking for wines to bring for the Paris tasting, 1976. He said that he came to Joe Heights and knocked the door, and he said, like, if you're a seller, I don't want to talk to you. If you want to buy a wine, I don't want to talk to you. So it was until he talked to him about what his plan was about this tasting, then that's when he let him into the cellar. But yeah, he shared that kind of information as well on his book. Well,
we had this event in Nashville. A very famous wine collector at this time was a neurosurgeon from Fort Worth named Marvin Overton. And Dr. Overton donated this, well, I donated the dinner, the event, but he donated all the wine. And this would have been in maybe 1989. We tasted every vintage of the Fay, Bella Oaks and Martha's Vineyard Cabernets that had been made to that point. And then in the evening, we had large format bottles of the best vintages of those wines with dinner. And Marvin and his wife came, and Joe came, and Marvin's daughter, and another guy from Benny Chinoze from Los Angeles came, and these great collectors from all over the country came to attend this event at my restaurant. And you know, Marvin donated all this wine. It was a lot of money. I mean, you know, it was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of wine that he donated. He also paid the airfare for the Rhodes, Bell and Barney Rhodes, who owned Martha's Vineyard, and for the Heights to come.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, Marvin's daughter asked Joe about the eucalyptus and mint in the characteristic in the Martha's Vineyard Cabernet. And Joe like screamed profanity at her for like 10 minutes about how there was no eucalyptus and mint in his Cabernet, and people who think there is are fools, and this is a bunch of BS, and this is why my wine is the greatest wine in the Napa Valley, and nobody else's wine is any good. And you stupid little girl, why would you think that there's eucalyptus and mint characteristics in my wine? And I mean, it was painful. I mean, it was really painful. And Marvin was about to kill him. I mean, because he was yelling at his daughter. It was just, but there is that generation: Mike Gergich, Joe Heights, Mr. Winiarski, Don Chapelet, a lot of others who and Peter and Robert Mondavi, obviously, who really created the Napa Valley, and then Stephen put it on the map. I mean, and we should talk, well, while everybody's talking about tasting the Chardonnay, we should talk about that, the tasting in Paris, the Judgement of Paris. I went on the website this morning and refreshed my memory about the wines that were poured blind for these very highly regarded experts in Paris. And the automatic assumption I think the average person would make was that Steven Spurrier tilted the playing field to the advantage of the California wines. But if you look at the wines that, and I hope you'll talk about this, if you look at the wines that were poured, it was actually tilted to the advantage of the French wines. Because the reds, the Bordeaux's were Aubryon, Mouton, Montrose, and Léoville-Las-Cases.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the 1970 vintage of 3 of those 4 wines. And 1970 is not, you know, one of the greatest vintages ever in Bordeaux, but it was a good vintage. And the vintage, the Stagsley Cabernet that won the tasting was the 73, which is not a particularly great vintage in the Napa Valley, right?
It was not I don't know exactly what's considered great or not, but I think one of the things with that one, it came from a second harvest from those vines.
Right.
So I think that's what also influences how distinct the wine was.
Because the vines were so young, as opposed to, I mean, the rule of thumb in the wine industry is that old vines make great wine, but these vines were only 3 years old, right?
Yes. So that is true. That is true, what you're saying, Hoyt. So when the vines are mature, they're very consistent. You know what I mean? They're established, they're consistent, they grow very uniform most of the years. Of course, it is influenced by the weather. But when they're young, you have a lot of different variabilities, right? So you have vines, small vines, they're still establishing the roots. There's some vines that are well established, and the canopy is big, and some of them are kind of weak, and that's where you get the small berries and very concentrated berries. And if it doesn't have that much leaf, then you have quite a bit of sun exposure. And if you have some vines that have a lot of leaf around it, then you get less sun exposure. So when young vines are in that stage, you have a lot of variables. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, the white wines, I'd forgotten that Wiedercrest existed. I know that Wiedercrest existed back then, but I have to search my memory banks way back to remember Wiedercrest. And the white wines were Domaine Leflevre and Rouleau I mean, they were the greatest wineries in Burgundy.
Mhm.
So again, it was really tilted to the favor of the French wines. I mean, I don't know what today, first growth Bordeaux sell for $1,000 a bottle or more, you know. Your best wine sells for about $300 a bottle. I would assume it was approximately the same then. So although Bordeaux had not gotten ultra expensive back then, but the French wines were more expensive than the California wines, much more expensive than the California wines in that tasting.
Yep.
And did you know that Paul, I've known Paul Draper a long time. We're pretty good friends. And he says that if it had been the 1974 vintage of the Napa Valley wine or California wines in the tasting, that Montebello would have won, not Stagsley. Do you know that he says that?
I did not know.
Yeah. He feels very strongly that if it had been his 74, that he would have walked away with the trophy and the world would be different, history would be different.
Yep. And, it's possible, to be honest, how it is possible, just like how history changed after that tasting,
Right.
Could be possible.
Well, talk to us about the Chardonnay, please.
All right. Sounds good. So the Chardonnay that you're tasting, if I'm correct, that's a 2019 vintage, correct?
2018, yes.
18, okay. So the name for that Chardonnay is called Caria. Caria means gracious in Greek, and that's what we wanted to show in that bottle of wine, a gracious Chardonnay. Our winemaking style, it's very fruit-forward Chardonnay, and very pleasant in the mid palate, with a touch of oak at the finish, and also very refreshing with a nice acidity. So the source of our Chardonnay, all right, I'm gonna show you a map of the Napa Valley, a topographic map of the Napa Valley. So I'm gonna try to angle it in the right way so you can see the mountains. Let's see, probably right there. All right, so this is the Napa Valley. So right here on the south, about 45 miles to the south, you have San Francisco. And then we have the San Pablo Bay, all this area right here. And the Napa Valley, it is nested between these two mountain ranges. All right. So down here you have Carneros area, and then you have Ognal area, and Coombsville is around right here. So early in the morning, the fog comes from the ocean up to the valley, and then once it gets to St. Helena or above, then it dissipates, and then you have to retry once they're getting hotter. So there is a lot of there's quite a bit of time on the fog that spends on the southern part of the Napa Valley. So that's why Carneros is really great to make Pinot, Merlot, and Chardonnay, and also the Ognal district right here. So our Chardonnay comes from those areas, from the Carneros area, from Ognal district, which is the southern part of the Napa Valley, and from Coombsville. And Coombsville, it comes from Arcadia, which is the vineyard that Warner Winarski owns. So fruit coming from Carneros, because it's kind of cooler. So you have this nice crispiness of green apple and pear. And once you move farther up to the valley, it is very warmer, and you get the tropical fruits like peach, like nectarine, all those. And especially Coombsville and specific Arcadia vineyard is very distinct for that Chardonnay. It tastes very, very light. Doesn't taste light, but it's very delicate, very floral, delicate. And also it has this minerality that is Arcadia. So putting all that wine grapes together from those different areas, it adds different components to the wine. And that's what makes our Chardonnay Caria.
The
Go ahead.
print is kind of small on the label, but it's 14% alcohol.
That is correct.
Yeah. So, you know, people worry about a lot about alcohol content in wines these days, but you know, it's important to remember that a wine can be somewhat elevated alcohol, but still be in balance. And like this one.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That is true. That is true. Alcohol also has to do with the temperature that you're drinking your wine at. If it's warmer, as you know, if it's warmer, you will smell more alcohol. If it's nice and cool, it's that you will taste the fruit of, smell the fruit of the wine. But yeah, alcohol. Sometimes alcohol can be put together very well balanced with the right fruit.
Well, my glass is probably 50 degrees and it's absolutely fantastic. So.
Good, good.
You know, these days, an awful lot of people say they only drink red wine because white wines are boring, and that's because they drink white wine straight out of the refrigerator, and at 35 degrees, nothing has any flavor, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, white wine, I'll just share my personal opinion, right? So white wine it's really, really interesting, right? Let's talk about Sauvignon Blanc a little bit, which you are not gonna taste a beta, the one that we make. But Sauvignon Blanc varietal is a very expressive varietal. Expressive means like it depends where it grows, how you manage it in the vineyards, how you benefit it. It really reflects all those stages that you do. If you pick it a little bit not so ripe, then it tastes grassy and like green peas and grassy. If you move it or you shift it or you went to get to the riper side, then you get all these tropical fruit and citruses. And also during the vinification, all a lot of little things you can do to the Sauvignon Blanc that really reflects that in the end product. So other white varietals, Chardonnay is so dynamic. It's so dynamic. It really reflects where it grows and also the vinification, the clones that you use. So white wine, it's really good.
Your father came here from Mexico to work in the vineyards, right?
That is correct.
And then you kind of grew up with your father as a vineyard worker, and a relatively young went to work in the cellars at Stagsley, right?
That is correct. So I'm gonna tell a little bit of my story. So yeah, my father, as many other people, histories that he will travel to the U.S. in the 80s, early 80s, to work in the vineyards. He will come in the beginning of the year, work all year round until after harvest, and then he'll come back to Mexico. So in '92, he decided to he was able and decided to bring his family to the valley. And you know, it's back then there was not so many regulations. So first thing my dad said is like, yeah, you have to come to work with me, the vineyards, during vacations. And that happened. So I worked in the vineyards a little bit. I learned quite a bit. I didn't think about it that much about wine. I just heard about there's a lot of wineries around the valley, and how great it is to work in wineries. And for me, I didn't pay that much attention. So it was right after high school when I was looking for a job, and then I found out that Stagsley Wine Cellars was looking. There was a position available to work as a seasonal bottling worker. So bottling is a department that bottles the wine pretty much. Dumps that queso glass, the bottles get filled, put a cork, capsule labeled, and then you pack them back into boxes. So I took the opportunity and I did that for 2 years. You know, seasonal. It started in March and in September, and so it was one day. I clearly remember that day. It was one day that I saw one. It was at the end of the day when we finished bottling, and I saw one of the cellar workers doing a sanitation on the filler bowl or the bottle filler. at the end of the day. So I saw how careful this worker was of removing the wine and putting it in very gently, placing it in a bucket, the leftover wine, and protecting it with the inert gas. And when he was sanitizing the filler bowl, also he was watching the right temperature, the right amount of timing of the hot water staying in the bottle filler. And that it caught my attention that so much detail and care was going into making wine. So I said to myself, I want to work in that department. So a year later, an opportunity came to work as a full-time worker in the cellar. The cellar is the department that makes all the winemaking process. So that's where I started. That's where I fall in love with wine. And what interests me is that when you're making wine or you're working with wine, one is you never learn. You never end learning. I mean, when you talk about oak, it's a whole new world. When you talk about yeast, there's a whole new world to learn about yeast and winemaking techniques and what influence the grapes, right? But the most important thing as well is it uses all your senses. That's what captured. That's my passion. Wine uses all your senses. When you are making wine and when you're tasting wine and that, it uses you need to look in the cellar, make sure it's clean, or look at the tank of wine and the wine inside the tanks. What is happening in the tank? Also, your sense of hearing. I mean, you can put, when wine is fermenting in barrels, you can put your ear, you can hear if it's fermenting or not. And you're tasting and you smell and you touch and feel. So that what captured my attention. So I worked there as a cellar worker for 8 years, and then I became a cellar supervisor, then cellar master, and now assistant winemaker, working with our winemaker, Marcos Notaro.
Well, you know, have you ever tasted the Cask 20, the 73 Stagsley SLV?
Yes, 2 times.
Really?
Yes.
How much do you think a bottle of 1973 Stagsley SLV would sell for at auction?
I'm sorry, you're asking me how much will sell for?
At auction.
I have no idea.
How many hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably. So when was the last time you tasted the 73? How long ago was it?
I want to say like 2 years ago.
So how old was it? 27, almost 40, well, 45 years old.
Yes.
How was it?
It was damn good. It was damn good.
Yeah, so it's still fresh and alive. It's not tired.
Yeah. No, it's not hard. It has a pronounced acidity, but well maintained. Right. And I mean, it's hard to describe and imagine, right? But just the experience of tasting that wine and having a snapshot of history and also the snapshot of how what the vintage was, it's just priceless, to be honest. But the wine, it has, when you put it in your mouth, it has this bright acidity, which wines back there, that's how they were made.
Right, right.
At least it has this bright acidity that it started going up, and then it sets a platform, and it sits there and ride, and then it comes this beautiful taste of tea, like black tea and herbs, dried herbs. And if you leave it, I just remember I was smelling it and let it sit for about 2-3 minutes and come back again. And it's always evolving to different profiles, aromas profiles.
How many bottles do you have in the wine cellar at Stagsley?
I think there are only like 7. Wow. 7 bottles.
Wow. Yeah. That's.
And actually, I have an empty bottle here of the bottle that won. One of the bottles won the 1976 Paris tasting. So that's how the label looks like.
Yeah.
And if you purchase a bottle of 2013 SLB, it has a back throw label. So it just looks exactly like this label.
Cool. Do you think that people confuse Stagsley wine cellars and Stagsley vineyards?
If I think they confuse them,
No.
yes, they did. Up to now.
I mean, why has Stagsley wine cellars never, well, I guess it's grandfathered in, but I think that there's confusion about the two wineries, and there's a big difference in the quality of wines that Stagsley wine cellars and Stagsley vineyards make. Right? I mean, they're very different quality level wines. Does that concern you at all?
No, not at all. Not at all. What I know is that they were established almost at the same time, 1970, both of them, and they were owned by two different entities.
Yeah.
And it was a lawsuit about who will keep the name of a Stagsley back then, and I think the lawsuit lasted like almost 10 years and like $1 million cost. And at the end, the settlement was for Stagsley Wine Cellar, which is us, is to have apostrophe before the S of Stags. And then for the other party was to put that apostrophe after the S. So, I mean, it's still very confusing,
Yeah.
but because both of the wineries are located within the Stagsley district.
Right.
And in the Stagsley district, you have a Stagsley winery, which is the other winery, and they are very well known for making a great Petit Syrah.
Right.
And we are Stagsley Wine Cellars, which we're known for our House of Cab and the history that we have.
So please tell us about the Hands of Time.
Hands of Time.
We're tasting the 2017.
2017. All right. So it's a red wine, which means it has. So there is in winemaking to protect the consumers. There are regulations. So if you want to put in your label that a wine is Cabernet Sauvignon, 80% is to be, at least 80% is to be Cabernet Sauvignon. So when wine or bottles on the label have red wine, that means that percentage is not met on the bottle. So for us, that wine has Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Malbec 2017. So the name Hands of Time. So as the winery was established in 1970, and after 1973, a lot of workers came through and worked with us. So in the wine industry, it's very common during harvest to hire extra help because we get really, really busy. So a lot of workers came during harvest, came and worked for Stagsley Wine Cellars. Some of them left, some of them stayed. But the ones that stay, they learn some things and then they move on to become winemakers or to own their own vineyards or they own their own wineries. So it was like a stepping stone and also like a school for them, Stagsley. That's how they saw it. So in 2003, Warren, he reached out to all these individuals that worked with him, and then they move on to own their own wineries and become winemakers, no vineyards. He called them and to celebrate, and also he made a dinner, and he asked them to print their hands on a French limestone kind of mud plaque, just to permanently place the hand image right there. So for all these winemakers, they hand printed their hand on this plaque, and there is a little plaque underneath that plaque that it says the name and also from what year to what year they worked for us. So that if you visit us, if you visit Stagsley Wine Cellars, all those handprints are lined up on a wall here in the winery. So as a tribute to all the help or the hand that they landed to Stagsley Wine Cellars for Stagsley Wine Cellars to be successful, it was a tribute for them to have a wine called Hands of Time.
What a fantastic idea.
I agree. I think so.
I mean, to recognize the contributions of everyone who's been part of your success is a fantastic idea, I think. Yeah, permanently. I mean, for permanently in limestone, it's going to last forever, right?
Oh yeah, yes. And the style for our Hands of Time Cabernet Sauvignon is very approachable. When I said approachable, it means like it's very ready to drink. It's very fruit forward. It has a beautiful meat palate, very balanced, and with a nice finish, balanced finish. So it's very approachable. That's how we want to make Hands of Time.
Are you old enough to have met Andrei Telechev?
No, I was not old enough.
We've had these conversations with, Joel Peterson from, now once in Future Wines, but used to be Ravenswood, and Mike Gergich's daughter. And it's amazing. It's Peter Mondavi at Charles Krug. Andrei Telechev's name comes up over when you talk to people about wine in California. Andrei Telechev's name always. I mean, he's passed away a long time ago. I mean, 30 years ago, maybe. I don't know, but his name. When you talk to people in the Napa Valley or in California about wine, somehow his name always comes up. And again, he created Mondavi Reserve. He created all these great wines. Trace back Gergich Hills Cabernet, Stagsley. What an incredible visionary this guy from Russia was, who came here and saw what the possibilities were. I think he planted Inglenook too. Back from for the wines that in the 40s and 50s were some of the greatest wines in the world. It's incredible to think about the contribution, the impact that this one guy had on California winemaking by seeing the possibilities that existed there.
Yes. You know what, Hoyt? I have to agree with you. It's funny that you mention him right now, because here at my job, they asked me to it's called meet the winemaker, right? In this case, is meet the assistant winemaker. So they ask you a bunch of questions, right? And so there were some fun questions they asked me. And it said, one of them was like, who would you like to have as a guest for a dinner? And guess who I said that I wanted to have dinner with?
Well, I'm guessing it was Andrei Telechev.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's just like you mentioned, he was everywhere. He was up in Washington.
Right.
Yep. Up in Washington, he influenced so much the winemaking and techniques up there. And like you say, he was a very visionary man.
I went up to visit Randy Dunn one time up on Howell Mountain, and I had a bottle of Leonetti Cellars Merlot in the back seat of my car, and he saw it and said, I've always wanted to taste that wine and I've never actually gotten to. I'll trade you any bottle of wine in my wine cellar for that bottle of wine. Randy Dunn. Wow. And I said, well, why don't you pick a bottle from your wine cellar that you would enjoy tasting, and we'll open both of them. And he brought a bottle of 82 Mouton Shields. So I basically traded a bottle of Leonetti Cellars Merlot for a bottle of 82 Mouton. And we drank them together in the vineyards and had a picnic lunch.
Wow. What
That was a good moment. I mean, just having a glass of wine with Randy Dunn to begin with, if it had been Gallo Hardy Burgundy, I would have been thrilled. But it was 82 Mouton. And Leonetti Cellars Merlot, which is, you know, one of the handful of greatest Merlots in the world. So these days, the trend is to high elevation mountain vineyards, like Dunn. I just mentioned Colgan, you know, but the Napa Valley, the success of Napa Valley was created with valley floor wineries like Stagsley and Heights and Mondavi and you know, I could go on and on, Chapelet and Cake Bread and all these wines. How is Stagsley? I mean, what is it about the valley floor that I'm struggling with the question I'm asking, but the wines, Cabernet especially from the valley floor, is different from Cabernet from Herb Lamb Vineyard or Howell Mountain or wherever. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, of course. You know, that's the beauty about wine, Hoyt, that it reflects what it grows, right? So let's talk about mountain fruit. When you are up in the mountain, the soil, the top soil is shallower, right? And also the vines tend to stress a little more, which the berries are a little bit smaller and they're more tannic. But they doesn't get as warmer up there. So when you take wine taste wine from the mountains, they may be a little more powerful, but they're just different in structure profile and also different in aroma profile. They're just different. If you really like mountains wines, then you choose those. So now here down in the valley, even though we are down in the valley, there is some areas that are not always the same, right? So let's talk about Stagsley district. So I'm gonna use the map again. So the Stagsley district is about right here. It's a little tiny area. If you notice, it's almost right in the middle, or maybe like 1/3 up of the Napa Valley itself. So Calistoga is up here, and then Stagsley district is right here. So Stagsley district gets, like I say, fog in the morning, and then in the afternoon gets some sun, and also gets the sun exposure from the west, right? So Stagsley district is right at the base of these mountain ranges right here. So all the sun that radiates over the day during the day and the afternoon, it heats up these mountains right here. In the night, it takes a while for this area to cool down. So the plants tends to continue working a little bit longer than normal. So that's what makes the difference of the Stagsley district. That's why you have so beautiful, elegant wines with a very polished tannins coming from the Stagsley district. So for the rest of the valley, you have deep soils like Tokalon. Their soils are deep and rich, and but also they have some alluvial fans coming from those mountains, and it brings a different profile to the wines that comes from those vineyards. So I don't know if I answered your question, but even though if the wines from the valley floor are different, they are not even from the valley floor. There is some elements that contribute to make wines from different taste different, and also the aromas. So there's some nuances there.
So you didn't go to winemaking school. You didn't go to Davis or Montpellier, or you
I not yet. I think it's necessary. I mean, being honest, it's necessary to have a title, a certificate, or yeah. So, but I did just took some courses here in the Napa Valley College. They have a great program supported by many of the wineries. So I went to school, Napa Valley College.
But you learned terms like alluvial fan in the cellar working at the winery, right?
Exactly. So when I first heard that terminology and then I further researched into it, it was with Warren and Michael Salachi. So Michael Salachi is the winemaker for Opus One. So he was the winemaker here from 97 to 2002. So I got to work with him. And I remember they looking into it. So that's how I learned a little bit of finance.
This Artemis Cabernet is phenomenal. It is a fabulous bottle of wine. So can you talk to us a little bit about it?
Of course, it will be my pleasure. So Artemis is the Greek goddess of the hunt, and that name fits perfectly. Thank you for showing the bottle.
Thank you, Tom.
It's almost empty, Tom.
Well, probably Ted drank 2/3 of the bottle and Tom drank 1/3.
So Artemis, the greatest goddess of the hunt, Greek goddess of the hunt, and that name fits perfectly, Hoyt, because that's what we do for the hunt. We hunt for the best vineyards of the Napa Valley. All right. So Artemis is made from a collection of vineyards from all over the Napa Valley. So the Napa Valley is very the success of Napa Valley is because it has it's very dynamic, and also different parts of the Napa Valley with different characteristics on their wines. So that's what we want to capture with Artemis. So our fruit source for Artemis, I'm going to use the map again. It is from the Coonsfield part, also Stagsley, and you were talking about mountains, Hoyt. So from Atlas Peak, we receive fruit as well for Artemis, and from Calistoga, and from Pope Valley also. So the warmer areas, right, within the valley, it will give you fruitier wines. The mountain areas will give you structure and acidity and brightness. And the valley floor, it will give you a nice balance. We were talking about the valley floors again. So it will be a very nice balance. So all those wines that you find in Napa Valley, all those little characteristics, we want to put it together in one bottle. So for our consumers to enjoy and to see what the Napa Valley is about. So in Artemis, you will find fruit, you will find a structure, you will find a little bit of tannins, and also with a nice balanced finish. So it's a complete wine, let's put it that way.
Who did the original art for the label? Do you know?
That I don't know.
I'm just looking at it. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, it really is. It's such a beautiful picture. Kind of makes you want to grab the bottle, which is good. Has there been any thought of a 50th year Paris tasting, Judgement of Paris tasting in 2026?
In 2026?
No, not 2026. What would it be? 2026. Is there any thought of having it recreating that?
No, I haven't heard anything, but I think that's a great idea.
I mean, you've still got a bottle of the 73 SLV you could provide.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, 70 Obriel's not going to be very good at 50 years old, I don't think so, or 56 years old.
I
I'm
guess we have to
surprised.
find out.
I mean, Stephen died about 3 months ago, so he can't do it, but, recently, but he can't do it, but somebody should. Maybe
Yeah.
I will. Maybe I
There you
will.
go. I'll be happy to be there.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the questions I'm going to ask you is when are you going to the Twin Cities, coming to the Twin Cities to host a tasting in this room with us?
Whenever you guys invite me over, Al.
So Alan, the ball's
we
in
can
your
certainly-
court. We're eager.
We can certainly make that happen. We can definitely talk about that and pick out a good time and get it on the calendar to do it, because I think it would be outstanding to do it.
I would suggest you not come in February.
No.
It's pretty rough here in February.
Okay.
I mean, you get used to it, but you wouldn't be used to it. Alan, since you're unmuted, do you have, is there any golden rectangle available?
Excuse me?
Is there any of the golden rectangle available through Southern?
No, nothing at all. Sorry.
I had a couple, for whatever reason, in the last few weeks, I've had a couple of people ask me if they could buy some. It's,
Sitting in my chair reading.
So this 2018 Artemis, this is Luis, this is to my palate, in this glass, on this day, in this room, this is an absolutely fabulous wine.
Thank you.
I think.
Thank you, Lloyd.
I just, you know, I need to figure, now I got to figure out what I'm going to cook tonight when I get home that's worthy of this amazing bottle of wine, because it is absolutely fabulous.
It's on.
I think to me, the great thing I always enjoy about, Stagsley Wine Cellars Artemis, it's really kind of a true reflection, as Louise mentioned, about really putting all those different parts of Napa Valley together and just creating just a wonderful bottle of wine.
We had, Luis, we had one of these conversations with Joel Peterson from Ravenswood and once in Future Wines, and he actually, we had one planned with his son with Bedrock, but his son, the night of our tasting, his son had a baby. His son and daughter-in-law had a baby, so Joel stepped in for us with no notice and presented talked to us about the Bedrock wines. But he talked about the reality of global climate change in the Napa Valley or in Northern California, that fires are not once every 3 or 4 or 5 years now, that they're 3 out of 4 years. And we'd better, as an industry, California wineries as an industry, had better figure out a way of dealing with that, or the future is going to be very difficult. Have the fires been a problem for Stagsley Wine Cellars?
Yes, it has been Hoyt, and I mean not just for Stagsley, but for the whole valley, or for all California. Let's put it that way. And you know what? Winemaking is it's making wine with what nature gives you. We're the mercy of nature. And if we have frost and it freezes the vine, then we have to deal with that. If we have heat spikes and cooks the fruit, we have to deal with that. So, but definitely fires affect winemaking. So it affects us as a winery, but also grape growers. Grape growers get impacted really, really hard. Because if the fire happens around their vineyards, that concentration of smoke impregnates more into the grapes. So those grapes cannot be used and it can be made into wine. So that's how they get impacted. And also small wineries that they produce, let's say only like 80 or 100 tons. And if their vineyard or their fruit source is in a certain area of the valley only, and that area gets impacted by fire, then they lose the whole crop. They lose the whole vintage and they have nothing to sell. So that's how devastating it comes to many people.
We had one of these I mentioned we had one of these conversations with Marco Del Forno, who makes, Del Forno Romano makes some of the greatest wines in the world, Valpolicella and Ripasso and Amarone. And he told the story that in 2007, the conditions were absolutely textbook, perfect. They were going to make the greatest wines they'd ever made at this legendary, this winery that makes great wine every year. They were going to make the greatest wines they'd ever made. And he was going to harvest the grapes on Thursday. And on Wednesday, in 15 minutes, he watched a hailstorm destroy his entire crop.
Wow.
He lost everything in 15 minutes, and there was nothing he could do. And, the financial impact of that is enormous, but they've been in business a long time. They're going to be okay financially.
Right.
The emotional impact of watching a year's work disappear in front of your eyes, and there's just nothing you can do. He said it's difficult to get over that. I mean, you can't really get over it because you're just finished. There's no wine to make. So you can't really do anything except prepare for the next vintage and hope that it's as good as this one would have been, which of course it wasn't going to be. So the ongoing theme, the common theme in these conversations about global climate change isn't so much riper grapes or higher sugars or whatever. It's more violent weather, that if it hails, it wipes out the entire vineyard. If it rains, if it used to rain an inch, now it rains 3 inches. If the wind used to blow 20 miles an hour, now it blows 40 miles an hour. And the challenge of dealing, and Joel talked a lot about dealing with the fires. And of course, when Joel talks about winemaking in California, you pretty much have to listen to him because he's so important.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, where the feeling comes from, it's you nurture the vine, right? So the year before you're done with harvest, it goes winter, the vine goes dormant, and then after the holidays, your mindset as a winemaker, as a grape grower, and as a vineyard worker start changing. You're just waiting January, you need to start pruning. So you nurture the plant. So you start like a relationship with the vineyards, right? So you start pruning, and after pruning, you just wait for the bud breaking. And if the bud breaks, you're like, okay, it's coming. And then you saw it like gradually grow and start flowering. And then you start seeing the little berries, and you get all excited. There is so much anticipation for harvest. And like you said, it's like to see it gone in a few minutes or days or weeks, like not have it, it's morally devastating.
Do you have aspirations of being a head winemaker?
Yes, definitely.
Your entire career has been at one winery. Do you have aspirations of being the head winemaker at that winery, or blank, ...
I think once you have the vision to become, let's say myself, I do want to be a head winemaker, and the opportunity will come. If it is here, it will be awesome and great. If not, I know it will be another place, but with the same goal and the same commitment, just to make the greatest wine possible for our consumers.
What winery would be if not Stagsley Wine Cellars, what winery would be the?
You know what, Hoyt? It's going to be Stagsley Winery.
That might, well, if you told Chateau Saint Michel Wine Estates that you were leaving Stagsley Wine Cellars to go to Stagsley Winery, they might murder you. I'm
No,
not sure. I'm not
I'm
sure
just
you would
kidding.
ever show up for that first day's work.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's hard to tell. You know, opportunities, if they come, they will come in a different ways, or you never know. It may be like a big winery, it'll be a super small winery just starting out making wine. Who knows?
Would you make something other than Chardonnay and Cabernet? Would you make Pinot Noir or Syrah or
Yes, definitely.
Veltliner or?
Definitely. I mean, that's the beauty of wine, right? Is like there is no bad variety. It's just getting to know the variety pretty much. Like Pinots, it takes someone. It always takes someone to grab your hand and walk you through the Pinot history and the Pinot winemaking techniques and what the Pinot should be like for that region. So it's just getting to know the varieties more and more. I know Cabernet is the king, but also I think there are some other beautiful varieties that are really great to have the opportunity to show to the consumers and learn about them.
I think you said that Stagsley Wine Cellars was purchased by Chateau Saint Michel and Ornellaia. Is Ornellaia part of that too?
No. So Stagsley Wine Cellars in 2007, it was purchased by Chateau Saint Michel from Washington.
Yeah.
And also it was a partnership with Piero Antinori.
Antinori. So I'm sorry. I confused that. Are the Antinori people, are they involved in the direction of the wines at Stagsley Wine Cellar?
Yes, yes, they are, especially Renzo Contreras. I don't know if you know him or know or heard about him.
Ricardo's son, right?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think
No,
so.
that is Renzo, and you know he has so much wine knowledge and from all over the world.
Right.
So he comes and tastes with us, and he gives his input, and it's great. It's great to have him on our side as well. I mean, they have like 6 generations of winemaking in Italy of history, so that's a great asset.
There's so many wineries now that are run by women. It's interesting. Antinori is run by 3 sisters, and Gaia is run by Gaia, and Trimbach is run by Anne Trimbach, and Catena Zapata, and it's just an interesting dynamic now that when I first started in this business, there were so few female winemakers, and now there are so many of the greatest wines in the world are made by women.
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, Luis, this has been absolutely fantastic. And congratulations on these 3 absolutely fabulous wines.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to leave it to Alan and Joseph, who's not, we can't see Joseph on the screen, but Joseph is here with us, to let me know when you can be here in the Twin Cities and conduct a tasting of these wines with us in person, and I hope it's soon.
Wow, it will be my pleasure and my honor to come over there and do a tasting with you guys.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you so much, and thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.